The most expensive mistake in AI isn't the compute cost. It's solving the wrong problem. Too many companies are rushing to write code before they've defined value. Today, we'll hear from Marcus Oliver, who leads Google Delta, our crack professional services team focused on AI transformation. He's here to explain why you need to put down the keyboard and pick up the whiteboard marker. We're talking about how to avoid the build trap and focus on business outcomes. I'm Salim Hasham, and welcome to the AI Vantage. Beyond the AI hype lies your next big opportunity. I'm Salim Hasham, Director of AI Transformation at Google Cloud, where I bring more than 2 decades of working with CEOs and their leadership teams to deliver business impact. Join me as I sit down with the brightest minds from Google, our partners, and customers to share real-world stories and proven strategies for AI success. This is your seat at the table. Welcome to the AI Vantage. Marcus, thanks for joining us. Before we begin, I'd love to maybe delve into your history. So the more I've gotten to know you, I think you've done some really interesting stuff. Our audience, maybe just give us a sense of, where you came from, your journey, and how that brings you to doing what you do now.
So thank you. Yeah, so I've been in the US 25 years now. Originally England. You may have sensed the accent, being a fellow Brit.
I did pick up on that.
And pretty soon after, I was working in advertising actually at the time, but pretty soon after arriving, I started to get more fascinated by innovation. And together with some partners, built a firm called Fahrenheit 212 in the innovation strategy space. So we, for maybe 10 years, had built that till 2016. We sold that to Capgemini, where we then, were part of the team that kind of helped develop their consultancy business that became Invent. I left 2022 to join Google and have been building this team Delta for just over 3.5 years now. It's been a wonderful experience being part of Google.
Yeah, from what I've heard, sort of the team behind the Frame TV, the endless combination Coke fountain. So, innovation is in your DNA.
I think it's sort of in English people's DNA, actually. There's we have more patents, I think, than, per head than most countries. And very much, it was a passion to try and be creative, find a new way of developing products. And I've been fortunate enough to work on some great projects over the years with some good companies, and no more than now being in Google with all of the technology that we have that we can bring to bear for our customers. That's particularly kind of interesting toolkit to be innovating with right now. So that's sort of been the journey.
So before we dive, I think, into the big question of what is Delta and your role, can you maybe help us set the scene? So there's a lot of noise in the market today. When we think about AI, there are those who are still scratching their head saying, what is AI and how do I deploy it? There are others that are actively deploying it and maybe doing interesting things. But how much of the noise in the marketplace today is reality? And then how do we help our audience dispel, the hype to say, look, here's how you should think about what is effectively a groundbreaking technology in practical terms?
Yeah, so even within the 3 years that I've been, within Google, the narrative has changed around AI a lot, right? And it's been, tremendous to see the excitement around that. And I think there have been a few kind of, not false dawns exactly, but there have been a few areas of, maybe overhype, overbelief. What we've done at Google, if you look to the ROI of AI report from 2025 that we put out, I think what we're seeing is, I think this was 3,500 executive CEOs that we interviewed around that. We're seeing 74% of that group say within 12 months they're starting to see return on AI. And that's very much what we're seeing in Delta with our customer relationships and projects. Obviously, we're very focused on making sure that we're delivering the right value. And I think that's kind of the the change of perspective. It beyond the hype, there's a lot more conversation around value returns and how to measure the value and how to think through what that those metrics need to be for success in the business. So that's been the shift, I think, recently, from maybe a little bit, let's just put our toe in the water and see what AI can do, to how can AI change our business.
So from, I think, experimentation that we saw over the last couple of years, what I'm hearing is 75% of those who are taking an active role in really thinking about AI are seeing a 12-month ROI. Is that correct?
Yes. So that was what the survey said. 74%, I think, was the precise number. So they are within that time starting to see the return on that investment, or see the possibility from the investment in technology. So, these days you can, within 12 months, you should be able to get a fairly good understanding as to what possibilities can be in these projects. The innovation life cycle has gone from, sometimes multiple years to sort of minutes in some places, right? So, we're certainly seeing the possibility of seeing those returns.
And that's part of the challenge when AI is developing so quickly. We seem to be releasing models, I guess, every 3 months on a clip, which just means the innovation cycle is much faster now. And so let's pull a thread on that. But before we sort of get to the details, I'd love to explore Delta. So I'm sure our audience understand that Google is a foundation model builder. Google is a technology service provider. But there is a part of Google that really thinks about working with our customers and driving towards impact. And Delta's core to that. So help us understand what Delta is, and specifically, the DNA of transformation and innovation that you bring. How is that being realized in a world of AI?
So, we're focused on creating, the first, the new, the moments that matter. The areas that haven't been built before, working with our customers to kind of be at the frontier, not just AI, but predominantly AI. And we're very much trying to use the Google processes, methodologies, products, tools, to bring to our customers and work with them, either with great partners like McKinsey, or directly with the customer, not for the customer. So we're not outsourced development. We're there to bring the approaches and the knowledge that Google have of building these systems. As one of the first AI first companies, we have a lot of experience in this world. So how we think about development, how we organize our businesses, how we develop product, how we execute at scale, all of those kind of perspectives are places we have knowledge and can bring that to an engagement and hopefully enable a great working relationship that's going to drive impact and outcome.
And so let's double click. I mean, I think, in the pre-AI world around large-scale technology change, there was a standardized approach, there's a well-understood methodology. It feels like AI is different. And if we think about AI, and particularly agentic, what makes it different? And then how do you bring innovation to the business? Is it a case of working with technology to work out what to do? Is it the business that takes the lead in these conversations?
Yeah, I think, one major shift is that it has conversations and almost ownership of these projects has shifted from often the technology arm of businesses to a more business-orientated conversation. That's been good for me. I love technology, but my background is more speaking to the C-suite and the CEOs and the strategic advisors. Strategic advice that we can provide to those companies. So what I think we are seeing is a shift to not just a desire to try technology, but to make sure that it's built on core business needs, core consumer and user needs, and prioritizing those kind of strategic initiatives and goals that will enable the kind of shift. So we're moving from kind of testing our waters with individual use cases and singular projects to a much more, how can this technology underpin the kind of business process change that is going to enable the kind of long-term success and gains that these businesses are looking for.
I think it's fascinating. So what I'm hearing, and I see it in my own work, is now this shift away from experimentation to actually looking at implementations. And in many cases, the experimentation is given great ideas, but it's about the realization. In conversations you and I have had about the pivot, there seems to me, I think, another shift happening. So I'd love to bring these two together, away from the role-based process, the chat or the augmented email, towards more of a business value chain. And that's sort of, I think, the underpinnings of Agentic. So if you can help our audience understand what Agentic is and what that shift represents.
Yeah, so I think that the first wave of building agents was quite persona driven, right? So we would see potentially driven from these businesses around productivity gains and efficiencies, but we were maybe going after a particular role within a company where you thought that if you built an agent providing that role, you would be able to save some and increase some efficiency around that business. What we have evolved to is not just thinking about individual personas, but thinking much more around kind of the processes that underpin multiple personas and multiple.
A persona, is that, for example, an HR manager? What do we mean by a persona?
Yeah, so I think a good way to describe the shift maybe is like, instead of thinking of Agentic, building an agent that replaces an analyst, building a system of agents that does the analyzing. So getting into the more long-term, structure of how these, journeys might work through a business, and optimizing that with AI.
Right. And this is what we commonly hear as reimagining a value chain.
Yes.
So what does it take to become one of these reimagineers? Because to me, it sounds like a complex process. Just help demystify.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You sort of talked about kind of, there was a lot of experimentation, and that is a good thing. We want to be testing, we want to be trying, we want to be experimenting, but it shouldn't be without the strategic thinking that goes into it. And I think that we've had potentially in these businesses a little bit too because it's so easy to build agents. We have so many opportunities for these different agents to be built. You kind of get into the problem of agent sprawl. And I think what we really need to do is come and think strategically of these business value chains, do the right planning and thinking in advance of always kind of running in at coding. And in doing so, make sure that we're aimed at strategic goals, aimed at the right long-term impact, aimed at the right logical multi-agent systems. All of that planning can be incredibly helpful and effective in advance of experimentation or in parallel to experimentation. We're Google as a process design sprints, all of these things. Experimentation is a great part of that. Just don't only do that. Do it with a strategic lens. Do it with a good understanding of the importance that it can provide.
So let's pull a thread on that. And I think you brought up something in our past conversations that's always stuck with me, and this concept called the coding trap. And so let's maybe begin with what is the coding trap, and why do we think that's not the right approach? But given a lot of our audience are either partners who are thinking, how do we start developing the capabilities we need, or their potential and actual customers who are saying, how do we actually drive the adoption? How do we mobilize? Yeah. How should we think about an agentic transformation? What is the DNA? What is the sequence of events? And maybe just help us frame that.
Yeah, well, so I think the when I talk about the coding trap, I think it's more to do with companies will be excited about working with Google and the engineers because we have an amazing set of engineers. But what I feel is a much better way to turn up to be effective with our customers is not just to provide an engineer who can be interesting to the company to work on certain projects and understand the coding, but to turn up with a more forward deployed squad where we can understand the governance that's going to have to be placed in the business to be effective, where we can make sure that we have the right product managers that can drive these activities, where we have the right strategists and thinkers that make sure that it's aligned to OKRs and strategic business goals. It is only when you have a much broader view that you're going to be successful. Otherwise, you have that agent sprawl, where you have multiple parts of the company building multiple agents with no structure and no governance. And what we want to make sure that our customers are doing for the long-term success is making sure that they have a framework, a governance, a set of the right security protocols that allow areas of the business to do that development, but all for the same end opportunity on the same core platform and the same structure, because then you can build multi-agent systems around those. Then you can get the benefit of the 1 + 1 = 11 rather than all of these separate agent sprawl examples. So the danger of running at coding without strategic thinking is you're running at the wrong problem. And coding is incredibly expensive. Coding something wrong is incredibly expensive and frustrating and all of the downsides. So what I think we've seen is in some of the cases where we haven't had success, it wasn't aimed at the right problem. And so that's really the core, like making sure that we've got the right structure and thought around that. And so we can turn up as a holistic team who understand user needs and the creativity and development and view as to what that needs to have, business needs and structure and value that we're going to be aimed at, and the right technology team that can work with a customer and enable that to be long-term, underpinned by the right governance.
Let's bring that to life. And so without necessarily naming any particular client, if you can't, can you take us through this journey? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And how do we want to think about, for our audience, the lessons that they should take away?
Firstly, I think it's good to spend a good time up front understanding and speaking with our customers and making sure that we're engaged in the right way, that this is a good business problem. If I take a recent example in insurance, we've been working with a mortgage provider who was hoping to provide their human agents with a set of information that could better service their customers and provide a better customer experience and long-term user value and all of those kind of important key metrics. What if kind of some of the mortgage insurance world? It's incredibly complicated with information in so many different silos. So what was happening with a number of these human agents is they would have 4 or 5 different pages open, trying to get all of that information to hand and skip across these different pieces. This is a great job for AI. It's a great job for a multi-agent system where you can start to think about, the analyst agent, the different parts of information, whether that's policies, whether that's customer legacy information, whether that's calculating different pricing options for customers. So if a customer was to call in to understand that their escrow amount has changed, they want to understand why that's changed, they want to understand what their new bill looks like, there's several parts to that question that an orchestrator agent can support, pulling all of the different information from the separate agents in order to then facilitate the human customer experience person to have that conversation in the right way. So they've got the what, they've got the why, that can pull together into a simple conversation and then be provided with the right empathy, right? So, depending on the insurance area, some of those conversations need to be very much handled by a human with certain empathy. So we're either supporting some of those human people, sometimes in cases we're replacing the need for that completely. So just depending on the industry and the need.
So what I'm hearing is focus on the problem at hand. Really think long and hard strategically about the value chain. What are the things in the process?
Yeah.
And how should they run as opposed to augmenting what happens today? Don't think of individual personas, but ultimately, and I love this notion of the orchestrator.
Yeah.
Have an orchestrator that can draw on different personas as needed and really focus on the outcome.
Yes.
Fantastic. And so let's end perhaps with a really hard question. And so if AI could solve any mystery, what would that be?
What is great is to start to see how Google is applying itself on some of these big world problems as well, obviously like AlphaFold, but we're starting to believe that within the next 10 years, we may see such advances in medical knowledge and knowledge around diseases that we can start to eradicate a large percentage of what has been interfering in daily lives for people, and so I'm very excited about the bigger problems like that AI will tackle, whether that's climate change or disease. Like, we're going to start to see massive advances in the next few years. So that's kind of, I think, some of the bigger picture items. Yeah,
that's fantastic. It really is the next evolution.
It really will be. Yeah,
Marcus, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Very nice.
And thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you on the next episode of the AI Vantage. Thank you for tuning in to the AI Vantage. Be sure to follow us on social. If you're interested in learning more about the Google Partner Ecosystem, visit the address on the screen below. Remember, the best way to predict the future is to build it. See you next time.